So good morning and grand rising. My name is Reverend Dr. Alice Reid, and I'm the spiritual director here, and I'm so glad to be with you here this morning in this beautiful sanctuary that the Baha'i have been so generous with us to allow us to lease from them. Our topic this year is indeed open at the top. And last month, we did this great job of really centering ourselves in principle, talking about, what it is, this thing called spirituality and science that we seem to merge together into what we call the Centers for Spiritual Living and the study of the science of mind. And so we talked about what it is, we talked about the way it works, we talked about what it does, and we talked about how to use it. And those talks are on our YouTube channel, and they really help to explain the basis for the principles of this spirituality and science that we work with called science of mind. And so this month, we are looking at the idea of embracing the edge. Embracing the edge. So we're going to be a little edgy this week. This month even. And what I want you to know is that the edge is where evolution is happening, and it's happening now. We are indeed on the edge of an evolutionary shift. And I have a friend who says, evolution is so slow. It's really slow. I mean, we can, when we're on the other side of it, it looks pretty quick because we're not in the middle of it. But it just moves so slowly. And I venture to say that Ernest Holmes was definitely on the growing edge of this evolutionary shift when 100 years ago, this movement began to come about. And so as we live on this edge of an evolutionary shift, and we look around us and things look, well, it depends on your purview, but things look a little chaotic. The systems that we have relied upon for stability look a little shaky. Things don't, there's a lot of it used to be coming out of people's mouths as we look at how things have changed so much and are continuing to change. And at what seems like a bit of a rapid pace, and I don't know about you, but sometimes my head is just spinning. And there's a variety of points of view. And because of social media and the internet, like when somebody sneezes in the Middle East, we know about it right away. And so there's this influx of information. Whew. Sometimes it's downright exhausting. Anybody with me with that? It's just downright exhausting. And when we look at the movements and the shifts that are happening, where are we to find ourselves? How do we navigate? Where do we land with all of this? Sometimes it can be so exhausting that the ideal place seems to be to just shut down. No, I'm just going to shut down. I was talking to somebody before the service. We were talking about a friend who's dealing with a lot of change, and how oftentimes they'll pull to adjusting the curtains or the volume on the phone during a meeting when there's some big topic coming up. And how many of us, when there's something that's edgy, something that's messy, something we don't quite know how to deal with, we lean towards, go into our head and kind of shut down our heart. Am I the only one? I don't think so. I think it's human nature. Like how else are we going to deal with this influx of information and the chaos of change and shift? And so what I want to tell you this month as we're looking at this idea of embracing the edge is that we are not headed toward the edge. We are not near the edge. We are in the trenches of the edge. And it doesn't mean that something's gone wrong. It just means that something's trying to be born, something's trying to shift. And the world is making space for it by the tension and the chaos that we're experiencing. And I don't need to tell you that throughout history, your personal history, the global history, evolution has never been neat and tidy. I have never been through a major change altogether, like where I had all my stuff together. No, when I go through a major change personally, and when we go through it culturally, there's often a little mess to put up with. And the mess is there to loosen us up and loosen our grip on what we think needs to happen. You know, when I looked at the whole year's theme and the different talks and the different categories and themes that we're going to be talking about from month to month, I also came up with my own themes that would suit me personally because as some of you know, I will be going on a pilgrimage later this year, and I plan to do something I've wanted to do for the better part of 15 years, and that is to walk the Camino in Spain. And in order to prepare myself for that, there's a lot of, it's not just the exercising and walking, it's the mental preparation, it's the spiritual preparation that needs to be done. And so this month, as we look at the edge, my subtext is letting go. Letting go. Last month, my subtext was getting grounded. This month, my subtext is letting go. What is it that I need to release? What is it that I need to hold lightly? What is it that is ready to be shed? What I know about cultures is that in order for them to transition, in order for them to shift, typically what is going on is that there's something else that wants to emerge, and the current culture can't hold it. There's no place for it. It's like that, trying to pour new wine in old wineskins, right? That little parable. And so when we have these periods of chaos or upset, it's an opportunity, invitation, if you will, to let go. Not to be a leaf on the wind floating willy-nilly, because we don't teach that. We do teach that there's some grace with all of this that will meet you at the level of your willingness to shift and change. And so when we experience these things, either in the world or personally, it's an opportunity or an invitation for repatterning. A couple of my favorite authors that talk about both cultural change and personal change, one of them you may be familiar with, maybe the other one as well, Barbara Marx Hubbard. She wrote that amazing book and a couple of subsequent books after it called Conscious Evolution. And I think that's what we're here to teach. We're here to teach and to preach and to talk and then to walk out conscious evolution. Being conscious as we move through the changing times. Being conscious as we see things unfolding around us. The other author is Margaret Wheatley. Anybody heard of Margaret Wheatley? Amazing woman, amazing body of work. She's talked about leadership in the time of chaos and change. She wrote a great book about the beginning, the middle, and the end of cultures, how they start, how they move, and then how they begin to die away. And so both of these amazing women lend themselves to this idea of edge walking, if you will. And then Science of Mind has always talked about evolution. It's always talked about the way we shift and move through life, that there's nothing really permanent except spirit itself that wants to create. The idea that everything we experience is temporary, everything we pray for, everything that's demonstrated comes to visit, but it's temporary. Because the next thought creates the next reality, and the next thought creates the next reality. And sometimes we have the same thought over and over again, and we continue to have the same reality, same stuff, different day. Anybody have that experience? Certainly. But when we are engaged in our growing edge and leaning in, and we're engaged in this philosophy, we are engaging in this mystical, magical, scientific way of moving through life and shifting and changing with the times. And so we teach this idea of cause and effect, and that we are working with the law of cause and effect. And then when we align ourselves to cause, there's a lot more grace when we experience the effect. And when we're working with the law, it doesn't respond to well, it does. It responds to everything with yes. But the most effective way to work with the law of cause and effect is to really not shrink, not panic, but to participate consciously. So consider this metaphor, if you will. You're driving, it's getting dark, it's foggy and rainy, you're struggling to see the road, you kind of grip the steering wheel tightly and you lean forward into the windshield to try to see, and it's really hard and you're really tense. But the problem isn't the road, it's the windshield. And the moment that you reach for the defroster, everything changes. You flip on the defroster, the windshield clears, and even though it's still foggy out, your vision becomes clearer. You begin to see what you're working with. And in times of chaos, we do the same thing emotionally and spiritually. Things get a little wonky, and we're feeling unsettled and uncentered, and we grip the steering wheel of life, and we kind of lean in to try to figure out what's going on. When the world feels frightening, and there's a lot of disorder, or if we've got something personally going on, sometimes we turn to blaming, sometimes we're quick to judge, sometimes we double down on we're right and they're wrong, points of view, if you will. But most importantly, we seek safety because we want to find some certainty, some sense of certainty. But our view is obscured, and we're trying to change the weather or the road because it's not out there. It starts in here. And what can be obscuring our vision is sometimes we're feeling fear, grief. Sometimes we're feeling uncertainty. Sometimes the world just doesn't seem right. And of course I'm talking about projection. My old friend projection. Don't you hate it? When you absolutely are certain about a certain thing, you're feeling all right and a little judgy, and suddenly you realize, oh, this is what I'm carrying into the room. It's not necessarily what the other person's carrying in the room. I hate when that happens. I really hate when that happens, and I love when I get to the other side of it, but in the middle of it, it stinks. I don't care for it at all. What I noticed is that sometimes my judgment can mask itself as clarity when really what it is just contraction. And sometimes my certainty feels like safety, but it rarely brings me any peace. No amount of external control will clear that inner fog. And what really is being invited in for us it's sort of like a breadcrumb on the trail. What's being invited in for us is to have some inner clarity, to turn inward. And it's not an easy move, especially when everyone else is so wrong. Yeah, it's not an easy move to turn within. It's much more comfortable to see the problem out there, that if only you would change. But it does give us a sense of control, and it keeps us, here's the kicker, it keeps us from feeling vulnerable. Now here's what I know about vulnerability. That's where I'm really living life. When I can be vulnerable, when I can drop into my heart, when I can be really real with someone and vulnerable and with warts and all available, that's when I really have a sense of oneness and spirit, when I can really experience spirit in the individuals and the relationships that I'm working with. The growing edge always calls us to be a little braver. And it's an opportunity for us. The things that I've noticed in myself is I get to ask when things feel a little wonky, when I'm recognizing that I'm kind of nearing that edge, when I'm not feeling safe, when I want to shut down and get into my brainiac head and all that, intellectual candy that I can play with my thoughts. Yeah, that's an opportunity for me to step back and ask some really good questions, simple questions. Who am I in this? Who do I want to be in this? What are the stories I'm hanging on to? Am I willing to loosen my grip a little, to see what's possible, to let go of what I think I know? Am I willing to soften my heart? And that softening can feel really scary. and mainly because, I don't know about you, but when I soften and drop into my heart, the armor of certainty falls away. Oh no. I have to be vulnerable and open. I have to be willing to explore the mystery of what's possible. And what I want you to know is that's really the beginning of healing. And no one is spared from the evolutionary shift. You may be sitting here saying, oh, all that stuff that's going on in the world, it doesn't affect me. No problem. I'm not all spun up about all of that. But I bet maybe you got something going on that's personal. I bet there's something in your world that's stirring you up, that maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's a job, maybe it's your checkbook. There's probably something personal. And if you're like me, for some God knows only reason, I like to lean into the growing edge. You got a little of both. Microphone dropped. Let's try this one. Am I on? Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. So where did I drop off? So I was saying, I was talking about the fact that the evolutionary shift spares no one. And if you're really one of those people who does a lot of spiritual practice, my guess is you're experiencing some spinning and some shifting worldwide and personally. And it's there for a reason. It's there to help you let go. It's there to help you step into a new possibility. It's there because something within you has outgrown the current existence that you are living. Science of Mind reminds us, you are here today or listening online because Science of Mind reminds us that spirit only knows wholeness, that all of this spinning is temporary, that it's our opportunity to lean over and turn on that defroster switch. And that defroster switch might look like meditation, affirmations, praying with a practitioner, taking Reverend Karen's class, The Four Agreements. Yeah. listening to Allendale sing their hearts out as they share their beautiful consciousness with us through song, listening to a talk, reading a daily reader. I don't know if anybody's picked up the Pivot Year. I know Reverend Carla told me she picked it up. This is like right on time for being open at the top. I'm going to read just a couple lines of yesterday's reading, day 31. You are an ocean of unrealized potential. You cannot imagine how deep and how wide your capacity really is unless it's been tested. Until you've been moved beyond where you thought your limits were and have had to redefine them. And in this, you find new energy. You find a better rhythm. You rediscover everything you believed you had lost. So Brianna Wiest, she's got it dialed in, this idea of leaning into our growing edge, trusting the emerging evolutionary process. That it's not just working on like the animal kingdom, it's working on us. It's working on the geology, right? That's the science of the earth. It's working on the geology, it's working on the spirituality, it's working on us emotionally, it's working on us intellectually. Take a deep breath. Oh, I need to. When we flip on the defroster switch, when we do our inner work, when the windshield begins to clear, it's not some passive act. No, not at all. No, you are becoming more available to divine wisdom, more available to take in and understand whatever's going on and what the meaning is within yourself, more available to wisdom and compassion, and then inspired conscious action instead of triggered experiences and responses. And all of this leads us back to our holy selves, the place where I began when I stepped out here after listening to that beautiful song, knowing my holy self wants to express itself, and your holy self wants to express itself, wants to walk the earth as you. But it does require a little letting go of what we think we know, if only to see if it comes back as truth. Letting go of what we think these old identities that we might carry about ourselves, if only to come back and revisit who we knew ourselves to be at one time in the midst of whatever's going on. Personal healing and collective healing are not separate processes. A world that works for everyone begins with people willing to tend to their inner life with honesty and courage. So as we move through this month together of embracing that edge, let's get a little edgy this month. And I invite you to hold this simple practice when the world feels overwhelming and you notice your walls are going up, fortified by your judgments, and you feel yourself positioning for certainty. Pause. Take a breath and ask gently, what inside of me is asking for clarity right now? What is being called forth? Turn on the defroster. Tend to that inner windshield and trust that as your vision clears, your holy self will naturally come into view. And the good news is we do this together. You don't have to walk it alone. That's why you're here in spiritual community, so that we can do this together. We can do that inner work, and then we can see clearly. We can support each other. That's the power of spiritual community. And then, as my friend David likes to say, we'll continue onward through the fog together. Thank you very much. So join me, if you will, and let's flip on that defroster switch for a minute and do a little spiritual mind treatment affirmative prayer. Taking a deep breath and letting it all out. For there is a peace beyond understanding. There is a wisdom beyond knowing. There is a grace available to each one. And I know this divine intelligence, the same divine intelligence that beats my heart, works my lungs, and rotates the earth around the sun and holds the stars in the sky is the same power that I am always working with each breath. And so I know for each one, regardless of the outer experience, the weather around us, that we remember that our point of alignment and power is within. That we choose to be conscious evolutionaries, walking hand in hand with an open heart, available to possibility, welcoming newness, and navigating shift. All of that is so grace-filled when we do it together, when we do it grounded in principle, knowing the power and the presence of this oneness, this one mind, this one heart, this one power that's only wants to experience life as each one. And so I give gratitude for our willingness to be courageous, gratitude for our willingness to be open, gratitude for our willingness to be vulnerable and available for what's next. And so I simply say, thank you, Spirit. Thank you for your consistency. I say thank you to each one for our willingness to be available. And I know the power in that presence continues to pour forth, to experience itself, to manifest the reality that is beyond our comprehension and yet is filled with our intention. And so we let this go. We give it back to the law. We know Spirit continues to move forward as we are all open at the top. And together I say, and we say, and so it is.